It's just paper and glue. That's what my brother-in-law said, right after he knocked my entire presentation model off the table and watched it shatter across my parents' kitchen floor. And my sister just stood there, arms crossed, like I was the one making a scene. My name is David Calloway. I'm 31 years old, and up until 8 months ago, I would have described my family as difficult but loving. I know better now. I'm a structural designer, not the glamorous kind you see on magazine covers standing in front of glass towers. The kind who works 15-hour days in a home studio, building physical presentation models by hand because clients in commercial real estate still want to touch something real before they sign. I've been doing this for 6 years. Freelance. My own clients, my own schedule, my own reputation built from nothing. The project that changed everything was called Harrow Point, a mixed-use waterfront development in Savannah. $52 million in planned construction. The developer, a firm out of Atlanta, had narrowed it down to 2 designers. Me and a firm with 20 employees and a marble lobby. I had a spare bedroom and a good name. I've been working on the Harrow Point proposal for 4 months. The physical model alone took 11 weeks. It was built on a 4x6 foam core base, 3 stories of hand-cut balsa, wire railings, resin water panels, LED accent lighting. I'd wired myself. Every window was individually placed. I know that sounds obsessive. My sister always said I cared too much about things that don't matter. She said that a lot. The presentation was on a Thursday morning. Wednesday evening, my parents called and asked me to bring the model over for dinner. They wanted to see it before the big day. My mother's words, "We want to celebrate you early." I should have said no. I had said no before, many times, and it had always led to a guilt trip that lasted a week. So I loaded the model carefully into my truck, drove it 20 minutes to their house, and set it up on the dining table while my mother made pasta. My brother-in-law showed up at 7. He'd been drinking since at least 5. I could tell by the way he talked over everyone and laughed too loud at things that weren't funny. His name is not worth giving. In my head, I've called him her husband for years. He sat down at the table, reached across for the breadbasket, and his elbow caught the corner of the presentation board. The model didn't just tip, it fell hard, corner first, onto the tile floor. The resin water panels cracked. The balsa upper structure broke in 3 places. The LED wiring pulled loose. I was on my knees before anyone else even processed what had happened. "Whoa, sorry, man." That was all he said. Not sorry. Just, "Sorry, man." The way you say it when you bump into someone in a hallway. I looked up at my sister. She looked at my brother-in-law, then back at me. "It's just paper and glue," she said. "You can fix it tonight." I want to tell you I said something sharp and brilliant right then. I didn't. I just kept looking at the model in pieces on the floor, doing math in my head. 11 weeks. Presentation in 14 hours. The resin alone needed 4 hours to cure. Even if I worked through the night, I couldn't rebuild what was broken. Not to the standard Harrow Point deserved. My dad crouched down next to me. "These things happen," he said quietly. It's not like he meant to. "The presentation is tomorrow morning." He nodded slowly, like I was telling him something irrelevant. "They'll understand." My mother was already cleaning up the breadbasket. She didn't look at the floor at all. I stood up. My brother-in-law was helping himself to pasta like nothing had happened. My sister was on her phone. I picked up every piece of that model by myself. Put them in boxes. Carried them to my truck. And when I came back inside, I sat down at the dinner table and ate quietly for exactly 6 minutes, because I needed to think before I acted. Here's something about me. My family never understood. When I go quiet, it's not because I'm fine. It's because I'm deciding. I left at 8:15, told my mother the food was good, didn't look at my brother-in-law. Drove home. The first call I made was to my studio partner, Jonah. He's not technically my partner, more like a fellow freelancer I share equipment with, including a mid-grade 3D printer we went halves on 2 years ago. I had been scanning my physical models every 2 weeks as part of my workflow documentation, something I started doing after a client dispute 3 years back where I needed to prove a design hadn't been altered. I didn't back things up for sentiment. I backed them up as legal protection, which meant the Harrow Point model existed in full as a digital file. down to the LED placement and the individual window angles. I called Jonah at 8:22. He answered on the second ring. I need the printer tonight. He didn't ask questions. That's why I trusted him. I got to the studio at 9. I had the file loaded by 9:15. The print wouldn't be identical to the hand-built model. The texture would be different. The warmth of the balsa would be gone. But it would be accurate, structurally correct, complete. I printed through the night. While the machine ran, I worked on the presentation materials, refined the cost breakdown, updated the sustainability projections I'd been meaning to revise anyway. I drank bad coffee from the gas station 2 blocks away, and I didn't feel sorry for myself once, because feeling sorry for yourself is a luxury that costs time. At 5:45 in the morning, I had a model. Not the one I'd built by hand. Better in some ways. Cleaner lines. Printable resin caught the light differently, almost like actual water. I showered at the studio. Changed into the suit I kept there for exactly these occasions. And at 8:50 Thursday morning, I walked into the Harrow Point presentation carrying a model that didn't exist 12 hours earlier. The lead developer's name was Mr. Forsyth. He was 60-something, silver hair, the kind of man who shook hands like he was testing grip strength. He looked at my model for a long time before saying anything. You built this? Printed and assembled. The design files are mine, the build was last night. He looked up. Last night? There was an incident with the original. I adapted. He nodded once, slowly, in a way that I realized later meant he respected that more than any story I could have told him. The presentation took 40 minutes. I answered every question. When one of his associates challenged my per-unit cost estimates, I walked them through the 3 comparable projects I'd analyzed, and the specific variance factors for the Savannah market. When they asked about timeline flexibility, I had a modified version ready on my tablet. By 10:30, Mr. Forsyth's assistant was scheduling a follow-up call. By the following Monday, I had a letter of intent in my inbox. The contract value was $4.8 million in design and oversight fees over 3 years. I didn't tell my family. I didn't post about it. I didn't do anything except go home, sleep for 9 hours, and then start thinking clearly about the rest of what needed to happen. Because the presentation wasn't the only thing I needed to address. Let me back up and tell you something I've been avoiding telling myself for years. I was my family's financial infrastructure, and I had let myself become that so slowly I almost didn't notice. My parents' mortgage refinanced 3 years ago. I co-signed it because my father's credit score had dipped after a business venture that didn't work out. My sister's car? I put it on my card when she said she'd pay me back monthly, and she paid me back for exactly 2 months before she forgot. My brother-in-law's dental work, $2,000, because my sister cried on the phone and said they were drowning. The streaming subscriptions, the family phone plan, the recurring grocery orders I'd set up for my parents during the pandemic that I somehow never canceled. I had never asked for any of this back in a way that carried consequences. I asked. They deflected. I absorbed it, and they had learned, correctly, that there were no consequences. The model on the kitchen floor was just the most recent lesson in a long curriculum. I spent the week after the Harrow Point win making a list, not an emotional list, a financial one. Every dollar I had extended, every account still in my name, every subscription, every arrangement that existed because I had agreed to it and could therefore unagree to it. The phone plan was 4 lines. Mine, my parents', my sister's, her husband's. I called the carrier and separated my line. Theirs would continue, now as their own account, at a rate about $60 higher per month because they'd lose my discount tier. I didn't warn them. It would show up on their next bill. The streaming services I canceled outright. 3 of them. I'd been paying for premium tiers my sister used more than I did. Done. The grocery auto order for my parents. I canceled the recurring charge. Left a single note in the order app. This order will not continue. Please set up your own account. The car. That one was more deliberate. My sister's car was financed in my name, which meant it was, legally, my car. She'd been making the payments, mostly, but 2 of the last 6 months I'd covered when she said she was short. I called the finance company and asked about my options. Transferring the loan to her name was possible if she qualified. She had not been making the payments long enough, at her income level, to qualify without a co-signer. I had been the co-signer. I removed myself. The finance company sent her a letter. She had 30 days to refinance into her own name or return the vehicle. She called me 4 days later. I was in the middle of a site review call. I let it go to voicemail. Her message was 2 minutes long. I'll give you the summary. She was shocked. She was hurt. She was furious. Her husband needed that car for work, and I was being vindictive over an accident. I did not call her back that day. My father texted, "Call your sister. This is getting out of hand." I replied, "I'll reach out when I have time." He sent 3 more messages over the next 2 days. The tone moved from annoyed to genuinely concerned. On the 4th day, he showed up at my studio. He never came to my studio. I'd invited him once when I finished my first big commercial project, and he said he was busy. He looked older standing in my doorway than I'd noticed before. He looked at the printers, the drafting table, the models on the shelves. "You built all this," he said. Not a question. "Yeah." He sat down in the chair I kept for clients. "Your sister is losing her mind. She'll figure it out." He was quiet for a moment. "She's calling it vindictive." "I know. Is it?" I looked at him. "Dad, her husband destroyed 4 months of work the night before the biggest presentation of my career. She called it paper and glue. You told me these things happen. I'm not vindictive. I'm just done absorbing consequences that aren't mine." He didn't say anything for a while. Then he looked at the shelves again. "Did you get the project?" "Yes." He exhaled. Something between relief and something harder to name. "Good. That's good." "It is. Can you help your sister with the car situation?" "Just until." "No." He looked at me. "Not this time," I said. "She needs to figure it out." He left 20 minutes later. He didn't argue. I think somewhere in there, under everything, he knew I was right. He just didn't know how to say that out loud without it meaning he'd been wrong for a long time. The car situation resolved itself in the way I knew it would. My brother-in-law borrowed money from his own family to refinance. It cost him more than it would have cost him to apologize and replace my model in October. That fact gave me no satisfaction. It was just the natural result of actions having weight. My mother called me 12 days after the dinner. Not to yell. She sounded tired. "I miss you," she said. "I miss you too. Can you come for dinner?" "Not yet, I need a little more time." She asked if I was angry at her specifically. I told her the truth. I wasn't angry at anyone specifically. I was just done participating in a system where my contributions were invisible until they stopped. She cried a little. I didn't rush to fix it. That was new for me. 2 months after Harrow Point, the second thing happened. I'd been quietly in conversation with a commercial real estate group called Meridian Coastal for about 6 weeks. They were expanding into the Southeast market and needed a design consultant who could handle both the structural proposal work and client-facing presentations without needing a full firm behind them. Lean, fast, credible. They'd found me through the Harrow Point developer, who had apparently said something generous about the way I handled the presentation. The lead at Meridian Coastal was a woman named Miss Everett. Precise, low drama, the kind of professional I immediately trusted because she never once asked me something she could have figured out herself. She was direct. She valued that quality in return. The role they were offering was consulting design lead. 18-month initial contract, retainer plus project fees. When she sent the number, I read it twice. It was more than I had made in the previous 2.5 years combined. I signed on a Tuesday. I told Jonah that evening over bad pizza. He hit the table so hard the drinks shook. That was celebration enough for me. I didn't post it anywhere. I didn't announce it. My family didn't know. They found out the way people find out things in this era. Meridian Coastal put out a press release naming me as their new consulting design lead for Southeast expansion. It ran in 2 trade publications. My father got a Google alert because years ago he'd set one up for my name after my first published project. Something he'd mentioned offhand once and I'd never forgotten. He forwarded it to the family group chat. No comment. Just the link. My sister called within the hour. I didn't answer. My mother texted, "We are so proud of you. Please call me." My father texted, "Congratulations, I mean that." My brother-in-law sent nothing. I noticed that and noted it without feeling anything about it. My sister left a voicemail. Her voice was different this time. Not angry. Not crying. Just careful. She said she was happy for me, and she was sorry about the model, and she hoped we could talk soon. I listened to it twice. I didn't call back that day. That evening I went for a walk in my neighborhood, something I'd started doing more since all of this began. It was late October, and the air had that dry, clean weight to it that I like. I thought about the sequence of things. The model on the floor. The night in the studio. Mr. Forsyth's handshake. The phone plan. My father in the doorway of my studio looking at the shelves. I didn't feel victorious. I want to be honest about that, because I think people expect a certain kind of ending to this kind of story. The triumphant music, the slow walk away from the explosion. That's not what it felt like. It felt quieter than that, like something had finally been set down that I'd been carrying for so long I'd stopped noticing the weight. I called my mother back the following Sunday. We talked for an hour. I told her I wasn't gone. I told her I wasn't gone to punish anyone. I told her the truth, which was that I needed the people I loved to see me fully, not just the parts of me that were useful. She cried. I let her. At the end, she said, "Your grandmother would have liked how you turned out." My grandmother had been the one person in my family who always said I was going to outgrow the house I'd been raised in, not as a criticism, as a compliment. My sister and I talked 3 weeks after that. It was hard in the way that honest conversations between people who love each other are hard. She apologized for what she said that night. Not the version where you apologize and then explain why you weren't really wrong. A real one. I believe her. I'm not naive about who she is or who her husband is, but I believe she was sorry. We're not close the way we were when we were kids. I don't know if we will be. But we're not done either. My brother-in-law has not apologized. I expect he never will. I've stopped waiting. The Harrow Point project broke ground in February. I flew to Savannah for the site ceremony, stood in the cold in my good coat and watched them move the first dirt and bought about the resin water panels I'd poured by hand in my spare bedroom, about the 11 weeks of evenings and weekends, about the way the model looked in pieces on my parents' kitchen floor. It's strange what survives, not the things you protect, the things you rebuild. My name is David Calloway, 31 years old, consulting design lead, Meridian Coastal Southeast, and for the first time in my adult life, I am nobody's safety net but my own. I've thought a lot about what actually happened that night, not the model falling, not what my sister said, but the part where I got on my knees and picked up every piece by myself while nobody moved. That image stayed with me longer than the anger did. Here's what I understand now that I didn't understand then. The way people treat your work is exactly the way they see you. Not the version they describe at Thanksgiving, not the version they post about if something happened to you. The real version, the one that shows up when there's no audience and no consequence. My brother-in-law saw a hobby project. My sister saw a dramatic reaction. My parents saw something that required managing. None of them saw 4 months of my actual life on that floor. And the thing about that is, they've been telling me exactly who they were for years. I just kept translating it into something softer. I paid bills. I co-signed loans. I set up grocery orders and never canceled them. I showed up. Every single time I showed up, I was communicating something to them, and the message wasn't generosity. The message was, there are no consequences here. I will absorb this. I will be fine. I kept handing them evidence that what they did didn't cost anything, and they believed me, because I believed it too. The model breaking was just the night I finally stopped pretending the evidence wasn't there. What I did after wasn't revenge. I want to be clear about that because I think people hear the word consequences and they assume cruelty. Canceling a phone plan isn't cruelty. Removing your name from a car loan you've been subsidizing for a year and a half isn't cruelty. It's just what happens when someone finally stops volunteering for a role they were never asked to audition for. Jonah asked me once, during those weeks, if I felt guilty. Honest answer, no. Not once. And I think the absence of guilt told me something important. Guilt shows up when you've done something wrong. What I felt instead was tired. A very specific kind of tired that lifts once you stop carrying weight that was never yours. Mr. Forsyth shook my hand after the presentation and said something I've turned over many times since. He said, "I like how you handled the setback. He didn't say he admired the model, didn't compliment the design first. He led with the setback, because in his world, how you respond to things going wrong is the actual data point. Everything else is just resume. I built something from nothing in a single night and walked into that room and earned that contract on pure work. Not connections, not leverage, not anyone else's goodwill. My files, my printer, my judgment under pressure. That moment is mine in a way that nothing anyone could give me ever could be. The hardest lesson wasn't about my family. It was about me. I had spent years making myself small enough to fit inside a version of home that was never actually built for who I was becoming. I kept renovating myself instead of the relationship. That's a choice. It took a model hitting a tile floor for me to see it clearly. I still talk to my mother. I'm still figuring out my sister. Some things take longer to rebuild than a presentation model, and not all of them come out cleaner on the other side. But I know this. I'm not going back to absorbing what isn't mine. Not the financial weight, not the disregard, not the version of myself that kneels on the floor while everyone else reaches for the breadbasket. That version of David is the one that broke that night. And unlike the model, I have no intention of rebuilding him.